Is it just me, or is the Studio Series line just petering out as a whole? There's definitely some egg on my face for saying a year or two ago that the Studio Series 86 line wasn't going to be replacing the regular Bayverse movie figures, and even if it did, it would be brief. And that for sure did not prove to be true. I think all Hasbro has put out for the movie figure since the 86 line started was Jolt, Megatron, Sideways, and now that stupid Dread figure with the pagoda of kibble on his back. So yeah, my bad guys, sorry for giving you hope. I was wrong that the 86 line wasn't replacing the regular movie stuff. But at the same time, it seems like Hasbro has run out of ideas or motivation for the line overall. Like the figures across the entirety of Studio Series are becoming fewer and further between. They ran the entire gamut of the Bumblebee figures basically as far as they could take it, even breaking the triple changers up into 2 figures each just to pad out the line further. Smart move! Also dick move. And all they could really make that's left is Voyager, Shockwave, and just like every version of the Seekers in the movie, so business as normal. Maybe also redo the first waves of the line, because those were based on outdated concept art, and then maybe recombine the triple changers just to maximize the dickishness. But that's by far the most they could do. There weren't a lot of Bay characters left to make toys of, and they don't seem to be interested in rolling out the background character squad, aside from Jolt and Sideways. And as for the G1 characters, they seem to be barely bothering as well. Every few months we get maybe one of these. What, does the Studio Series line have only like one designer in the whole thing, and he has to finalize every figure by himself, then complete a wipeout course to turn it in before they can make another one? Is the whole Studio Series just going to end in a year or something? Boy, they better hope that the Rise of the Beasts does well, let me tell you what, because this feels like this line is doomed otherwise. Enough musings, let's talk about the 86 Ironhide. Ironhide here is pretty cool. It, however, does not look very much like Ironhide. This is the 86 line. This is supposed to be the screen-perfect versions of the character. But this is like Ironhide if you asked an adversarial AI to draw you a picture of him. Sure, it got all the key points here, but literally none of them look right. The sculpting keeps shifting between too smooth and too angular. He's too gangly, he shouldn't have these flank tires, he feels overall too skinny and yet at the same time puffy. Though that's not to say that this is bad. Overall, I'm enjoying this a fair amount. For sure, infinitely more than I would the Earthrise version, but it is not what's advertised when this is part of the Studio Series line. This looks like him, you know who it is instantaneously, but at the same time it feels like the Dream version, the one where someone was asked to draw him from pure memory. Or like the sculptor was drunk. This figure feels pretty good. Not the most sturdy, give him any kind of shake and he will pretty readily flail about, but he's a reasonable amount over the edge of being able to hold his poses. So it's not a problem, it just feels like it could have been more satisfying to handle. The back view of the figure would be tolerable, a little kibble heavy, but mostly clean, if it weren't for the miserable hollowness of the wrists. Normally this isn't something I'd much comment on, but then again, normally the wrist hollowness is pointed inwards towards the thighs, mostly out of sight, and normally it looks even a little bit clean. This is absolutely hideous, and it shows anytime you have the figure in anything other than an A or T pose. He also has a monoskirt. Disgusting. I know there are people going around saying that this is something that you can fix yourself, as it's a part that Hasbro designed to be separated, then just didn't go through the process of cutting it into multiple pieces. But to be frank, those people are just taking the maximum level of copium possible before they'd OD and die. Look at the underside of this part, damn it! This was not designed to be separate pieces, and cutting this so it can be requires you to knock out a pin and both have a fine enough saw, which who has something like that? This needs a jeweler's saw or something, and a delicate enough touch so you don't end up destroying this part. Can you do it? Yes, but I could also make Earthrise Optimus Prime's legs shorter by cutting out the middle of his shins and thighs and then plastic cementing them back together. This is not something that 99.999% of the people who ever buy this thing will do, and it should be treated as a for real flaw, and not like something that if you just know better can be dealt with. By the way, it is amazing just how much skirts do help with the look of the proportions, though the monoskirt isn't necessary to benefit from skirt. Like, this is yet another figure where the legs would look miles too long if it was just allowed to show the actual tops of the hips, so this is a big help. Though the skirt is so chunky, it does kind of look weird on its own. Like, the legs and stomach recede behind the bulge so much, it looks like he's wearing a diaper. And I just can't contain my hatred for the fact that his heels are the painted section of his bumper. Leave him in robot mode on a hard surface and you can say goodbye to that paint. For a positive point, however, I was very worried that this was going to be severely undersized compared to what he's supposed to be like, considering when in his box, he looks like a toddler trying to peek through a car window. But I'm happy to report that he's basically the exact same height as the Siege, which was one of the bigger deluxes at the time, so this feels a little more on par with the Voyager scale and price point than Hot Rod does. Head is both good and at the same time, very swollen. He also has a Buzz Lightyear if he was a Who from Whoville thing going on. And he's missing the harsh angles on his face. I think that detail might be the #1 thing that annoys me most about modern Hasbro head sculpts. So many of these finger quotes, apparently screen accurate characters are supposed to have these harsh angles cut into their faces, and they are just missing on every last one of them. How are you going to have a perfect G1 movie accurate Ironhide, and then have his face so rounded it looks like he's having an allergic reaction? Just about the only thing I think looks right on this head sculpt is the mohawk. So while I do feel this robot mode looks pretty decent, it does not look at all like what it's supposed to look like, which would make sense if this was from Siege or Earthrise, but this was from the 86 line. It should have been more accurate than this. Instead, what we got was Ironhide's stunt double from a bad made-for-TV movie, which still has its charm, but it's not what they were trying to make. For accessories, he just comes with his 2 guns that he used in the movie, which would mostly be fine, but they are hollow as shit, and they seriously didn't need to save on the 1/100th of a gram of plastic this prevented them from wasting. Truly, a pair of weapons that couldn't surpass a single Decepticon, considering how that turned out for them in the movie. Seriously, it was wall-to-wall enemies. How did you 2 miss? You have the aim of drunk stormtroopers. These things are so light despite the fact that they're reasonably big, I feel like I could inhale them. Posability is really good. Head moves more than average with some good tilt down, shoulders pull like a 91, really bad fakey backwards butterfly, 90 elbows, sword-wielding wrists with rotation, back crunch, legs are unimpeded in all directions, though the monoskirt makes the forward kick ugly, normal 90 knees, and advanced feet with a huge tilt down and a monstrous tilt up, plus a rocker. So yeah, this puts the Legacy average pretty much to shame, not by having more range in its joints than normal, because those tend to be pretty in line, but by pure domination in the number of joints. He has way more than normal in terms of specialty joints. And sure, a few of them don't look great, but the added functionality is still a pro that can be ignored if you think it makes it look ugly. Transformation is pretty good too. It's involved, it's interesting, it's a little too panel heavy when it depends on a lot of clear panels, and I wish the wrists did more in transformation. They just don't feel done when they only hinge down like 75% of the way. Plus, lodging the windshield into the roof is a bitch, and it's an even bigger bitch to get it back out. But otherwise, this is actually really fun, and probably the highlight of the figure for me. And then the alt mode is a decent general van, but it's got a bunch of issues. For starters, and least egregiously of all, the back likes to split a bit down the middle. That's immensely deal-withable, but far less forgivable is the fact that nothing is color matched. I was hoping that in person this wouldn't be as apparent, but no, none of this looks like the same color. And for what? So we can have windows along the sides that lead to nothing? There is at least some semblance of something to see in there, so it's not the absolute worst it could possibly be, but it's pretty close to the worst of all worlds. The windshield is a good bit too short, actually stopping before the side windows do. It only has the barest suggestion of rear view mirrors. These giant hinges on the sides are just so hideous. Not so much along the rear, but the ones up next to the windows. And then there's just the fact that, once again, this isn't the kind of alt mode Ironhide had. Even in the 2 seconds of the movie where we actually see it, you can observe that it's far more angular than this thing. Ironhide isn't supposed to look like a real van. Not that this really does either. It's an angular little brick of a thing. And if this was, say, the Earthrise version, I'd understand these changes. But no, the Earthrise version is something far worse than this. And again, this is fine, it rolls great, it's an acceptable van, it's just why is this the 86 version when it's missing the mark by a couple 100 miles? So as a toy on its own, I actually really like this thing. It's a fun version of Ironhide, it just isn't the 86 one. It makes for an acceptably convincing van if you take it as a toy with more than a few problems. But the way that you get into the van mode is mostly a joy, one of the better transformations recently, and the robot mode is pretty great. Once again, not looking like it should, but looking decently cool, and still a ton like the character. Really, all my consternation for this thing stems from the fact that it's 86. And I'm starting to get the impression that the 86 section of the studio series is phoning its dedication to screen accuracy in. It was always a little suspect, what with Grimlock's sculpting and Blur's nightmare on top of his shoulders, but it did at least feel like they were trying to get close. Here, it feels like they just did what they wanted and produced a good toy, but not one that achieves what they said they were going for. If you get this, you will enjoy it, but don't expect to be saying anything like, yes, I finally have the perfect version of this character. And that's not half what I have to say, but it's enough what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.